The big meeting hall on Zephyr Station buzzed with voices from across the galaxy. Ambassador Helen Morrison sat in her chair and watched as 47 different alien species talked about trade deals and border fights. She wore her best diplomatic smile, but her eyes stayed sharp and ready. The Valkyrie delegate stood up. His body looked like it was made of blue crystal, and light bounced off him as he moved. When he spoke, his words came out cold and hard, like ice breaking. "The humans are getting too bold," he said. "They take more space every month. Maybe we need to show them where they belong in this galaxy." Other aliens nodded their heads. The Sorok looked like giant lizards, and their scales made soft clicking sounds as they agreed. The bug-like Zephyrians moved their sharp mouth parts up and down. To all of them, humans were still the new kids who had joined their club only 200 years ago. Morrison kept smiling, but her aide, Jake Sullivan, saw her hands get tight. He leaned forward to whisper something, but she held up one finger to stop him. "Dear friends," Morrison said as she stood up slowly, "I think there might be some holes in your history books. Maybe we should set up some classes so we can all learn about each other better." The Valkyrie delegate made a sound like glass breaking. "What could babies like you teach us about galactic history? Your whole species is younger than some of our shopping lists." Morrison's smile never changed, but people who knew humans well could see something dangerous in her eyes. "Oh, I think you would be very surprised by the things we forgot to mention when we first met." When the meeting ended, aliens walked through the station halls and whispered to each other. The younger species asked questions, while the older ones laughed at what they called human big talk. None of them could remember why first contact with humans had gone so smooth. None of them wondered why space negotiations had been so fast, or why certain areas had been given to humans without any fights. Deep in the locked files of the Galactic History database sat records that nobody had touched for years. Only a few beings in the whole galaxy knew the access codes. These files held the truth about the Un's vengeance. A human warship that had once made the entire galaxy shake with fear. 3 days later, strange reports started coming in from everywhere. Teams digging on dead worlds found blast marks that didn't make sense. Space junk collectors discovered wreck pieces with energy marks that didn't match any known weapons. Most scary of all, the robot minds of the Synthetic Coalition began having what they called memory errors about something they said shouldn't exist in their data. Banks. Dr. Lisa Park was a human scientist who studied alien ruins. She worked on a far world called Kepler 442c with her team. While digging in what looked like an old battlefield, they found a huge crater filled with glass that used to be sand. The glass had been made by heat levels that should be impossible to create. The age tests say this happened exactly 203 years ago, she told her boss over long-distance radio. But the energy readings are off all our charts. Whatever made this wasn't any weapon we know about. Her report reached Admiral Scott Baker at Earth's Deep Space Command in just hours. Baker was an old man in his 70s who had worked in the human fleet for over 40 years. When he read the report, he felt his stomach drop. He knew that date very well and made a secret call to Fleet Admiral Catherine Bell, the top military person in human space. "Ma'am, we have a big problem," Baker said. "The dig teams are getting too close to finding out the truth. How long before someone puts all the pieces together?" Bell's old face appeared on the screen. Her silver hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes looked tired. "The Galactic Council is already asking hard questions. Morrison has been dealing with them all week. The Valkyrie won't leave it alone." "Do we tell them the truth?" Baker asked. "Tell them what, exactly?" Bell said with a bitter laugh. "That we've been hiding the most powerful warship ever built. That the real reason they welcomed us so nicely wasn't because we were charming and good at talking, but because they were scared of what might happen if they said no." Far out in the Sol system, past the cold rock called Pluto, a huge structure floated in the black emptiness of space. The UN's vengeance stretched 3 kilometers from front to back, all human engineering and determination. Its metal skin showed scars from battles fought when humans first started exploring space. It had no name tags or numbers on the outside. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the reason humanity got a seat at the big table with all the galaxy's important species. Captain Roy Henderson commanded the ship and read his new orders with the same calm face he always wore. After 200 years of staying quiet and hidden, the vengeance was about to remind the galaxy why some things should stay forgotten. The ship's computer, called Oracle, spoke in a voice that carried the weight of many battles. "Captain, all systems are ready. Shall I start looking for targets?" "Not yet," Henderson said, watching the screen that showed where different alien fleets were located throughout space. "We're not here to start a war. We're here to remind them why the last one ended the way it did." The orders were simple and clear. Intelligence reports said that several of the more violent galactic powers were working together. They thought they could pressure humanity into accepting smaller territory claims and fewer resources. The Valkyrie had been especially loud about humanity's position in galactic politics being unfair. What these aliens didn't understand was that humanity's position had never been about talking or making deals. It had been about showing power so overwhelming that fighting back became impossible to even think about. Morrison stood in her office and looked out at the stars. She knew what was coming and felt the weight of secrets that had kept the peace for 2 centuries. Soon, the galaxy would remember why they had been so eager to be friends with humanity all those years ago. The reports kept coming in and getting stranger each day. Archaeological teams on worlds where nothing lived found energy blast patterns that made no sense. The patterns were too big and too powerful for any weapon they knew about. Space salvage crews who collected old ship parts started finding pieces with burn marks from energy types that shouldn't exist. The most frightening reports came from the Synthetic Coalition. These were artificial minds that shared information across the galaxy. They started experiencing what they called broken memory pieces about something they claimed should not be in their databases. When other species asked what they were remembering, the synthetic minds would go quiet for long periods, then say they could not discuss it. Dr. Lisa Park continued her dig work on the dead world. Her team found more craters and blast zones that all dated to the same time period, exactly 203 years ago. Each crater showed signs of weapons that could melt solid rock into glass and bend metal into impossible shapes. "I've never seen anything like this," she told her assistant Ben Clark, as they stood at the edge of a crater that stretched 4 kilometers. The energy levels needed to do this would require the power output of an entire star. Park sent detailed reports to Earth every day. Each report contained more evidence that something incredible had happened on this world centuries ago, something that involved weapons technology far beyond anything currently known to galactic science. Admiral Scott Baker read every report and felt his worry grow deeper. He had been a young officer during the events that created these blast patterns. He remembered the UN's vengeance and what it could do. He also remembered the decision to hide that power from the galaxy. "Sir, we're getting inquiries from 12 different species about unusual archaeological findings." His aide, Lieutenant Commander Nancy Davis, reported. "They're all asking if we have any information about advanced human weapons from the early contact period." Baker rubbed his tired eyes. "What are we telling them?" Standard response: "We refer them to the public archives and suggest they contact the Galactic Historical Society." But the public archives contained almost nothing about humanity's real military capabilities. The historical records had been carefully edited to show humans as peaceful explorers who preferred negotiation to conflict. The truth was locked away in classified files that required clearance levels most people didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Valkyrie High Command was conducting their own investigation. General Kethvar had ordered his best researchers to examine every record they had about early human contact. What they found in their oldest files made him call an emergency meeting. The energy signatures we recorded during first contact match the patterns being found on these dead worlds, his chief science officer reported. But our initial contact reports classify human weapons as primitive compared to galactic standards. Kath studied the conflicting data with growing unease. Either our sensors malfunctioned during first contact, or someone has been lying about human capabilities for 2 centuries. The Sorak Empire was having similar problems with their records. Ancient files spoke of human ships that could do impossible things, but more recent documents dismissed these reports as sensor errors or exaggerated battle stories. High Commander Vax ordered his intelligence teams to investigate every human military action from the past 200 years. "Find me proof," he told his staff. "If the humans have been hiding their true power, I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Back in the Sol system, Fleet Admiral Catherine Bell stood in the command center of Earth's most secret military facility. Around her, screens showed the locations of every major alien fleet in the galaxy. Intelligence reports streamed in constantly, showing increased military activity among species that had been peaceful for decades. "They're starting to remember," she told Admiral Baker during their daily briefing. "The Valkyrie have tripled their border patrols. The Sorak are moving battle fleets into positions they haven't occupied since the early contact wars. And the Zephyrian Queen Mother has activated her home guard for the first time in 50 years. Baker nodded grimly. "How long do we have before someone makes a move? Unknown? But our intelligence suggests that several species are forming a coalition. They believe that if they work together, they can force us to accept reduced territorial claims and resource allocations." Bell walked to a wall display that showed a tactical map of human space. Red markers indicated areas where alien military buildups were occurring. The pattern was clear. They were being surrounded. "Ma'am, there's something else," Baker said quietly. "The synthetic minds are starting to remember. If they share their recovered memories with their organic allies, the secret will be out completely." Bell stared at the tactical display for a long time. The decision she was about to make would change everything. For 2 centuries, humanity had maintained peace through hidden strength. They had allowed other species to believe that diplomatic skill and economic cooperation were the foundations of human influence in galactic affairs. "Send word to Captain Henderson," she finally said. "It's time to wake up the vengeance." Deep in the outer Sol system, past the cold darkness beyond Pluto, the UNS Vengeance received its activation codes. Captain Roy Henderson walked the corridors of the massive ship as his crew began bringing systems online that hadn't been used for 200 years. The ship's AI Oracle began running diagnostics on weapons that could reshape reality itself. "All sections report ready status," Commander Helen Torres announced from the bridge. "Primary weapons systems show full operational capacity. Defensive screens are at maximum efficiency. The ship is ready for whatever comes next." Henderson looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were moving into position for what they believed would be a show of force against humanity. They thought they understood the balance of power in the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they had been for the past 2 centuries. The galaxy was about to remember why they had been so eager to welcome humanity as partners instead of enemies. And the UN's vengeance was going to be their teacher. "Set course for the Valkyrie border," Henderson ordered. "It's time to remind the galaxy what real power looks like." Captain Zara Al-Hassan was hauling food supplies to the Vega colonies when her ship's communication system lit up with priority alerts. She had been flying cargo runs between human worlds for 15 years and had never seen anything like the message that appeared on her screen. "All civilian vessels, stay on your current paths and do not change course. Military exercise in progress. Do not investigate any unusual energy readings you may detect." Alhazen stared at the message and felt her hands get cold. Human military exercises were always announced months ahead of time and happened in special training areas far from trade routes. This message felt different, urgent, and secret in a way that made her nervous. She didn't know that the UN's Vengeance had just left its hidden dock for the first time in over 2 centuries. The massive warship moved through space like a shadow, its 3-kilometer hull darker than the void around it. On the bridge, Captain Roy Henderson watched his crew check systems that hadn't been fired in anger for generations. The ship's AI spoke with a voice that carried the memory of battles from humanity's early days in space. All systems show normal operation, Captain. Primary weapon arrays are at full power. Should I begin looking for targets? Not yet, Oracle, Henderson replied, his eyes fixed on the tactical screen showing alien fleet positions throughout the sector. We're not here to start a war. We're here to remind them why the last one ended. The Vengeance had a specific mission. Intelligence reports showed that several aggressive galactic powers were forming a group, believing they could pressure humanity into accepting smaller territories and fewer resources. The Valkyrie had been especially loud about humanity's position in galactic politics being unfair and undeserved. What these species didn't understand was that humanity's position had never been about negotiation or compromise. It was about demonstrating power so complete that resistance became unthinkable. The first target was a Valkyrie military base on the edge of their territory. The fortress called Crystalline Spear served as both a defensive position and a symbol of Valkyrie technological superiority. The station housed over 50,000 military personnel and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The Vengeance approached at normal space speed, its massive bulk casting shadows across the station's sensor equipment. Commander Helen Torres, the ship's weapons officer, reported from her station with calm professionalism that hid the magnitude of what they were about to demonstrate. Target acquired, Captain. The station is sending us messages on all frequencies. They're demanding identification and saying we're violating their territory. Henderson nodded slowly. Open a channel. Let them see what they're dealing with. The response from Crystalline Spear was immediate and predictable. Alarm sounds began wailing across the station as sensors fully registered what they were looking at. The Valkyrie commander, whose crystal features now showed visible stress cracks, sent a transmission that mixed bravado with barely hidden terror. Unknown human vessel, you are violating Valkyrie space. Leave immediately or face the consequences. Henderson's response was delivered in the same calm tone he might use to order breakfast. This is Captain Roy Henderson of the UN's Vengeance. We are conducting a training exercise. Please maintain your position and observe. General Kethver commanded Crystalline Spear and stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. The human ship was showing energy outputs that his instruments said were impossible. He had commanded this station for 20 years and had never seen anything like it. How can they be generating that much power? He demanded of his tactical officer. Their reactor output is reading at 12 times our maximum capacity. The sensors must be broken. Sir, the tactical officer replied, his crystal voice trembling. I've run diagnostics 3 times. The readings are accurate. That ship is producing more energy than our entire home fleet combined. The Vengeance positioned itself at what any reasonable military commander would consider an impossible attack range. Standard combat doctrine across all galactic militaries said effective fighting happened at ranges measured in hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The human ship sat 2 million kilometers away, well beyond the effective range of any known weapon system in the galactic arsenal. Commander Torres began the weapon sequence with practiced efficiency, charging primary array, gravitational lens. Systems are online, quantum cascade initiators reaching critical levels. The technology aboard the Vengeance represented the peak of human military engineering. It had been developed during humanity's first century in space, when they had no idea what threats they might face among the stars. The weapons weren't designed for normal warfare, but for the possibility of facing enemies that could end human civilization entirely on crystalline spear. The Valkyrie command staff watched in confusion as energy readings from the human ship climbed 2 levels. Their instruments insisted were physically impossible. They had no frame of reference for what they were seeing. "Sir, their weapons are charging," the tactical officer reported, "but the energy patterns don't match any known technology. It's like they're bending space itself." Henderson watched the tactical display with the patience of someone who had seen this scenario before. The Vengeance's primary weapon wasn't simply a bigger version of conventional military hardware. It was a device that could manipulate gravity fields, bend space and time, and channel energy through dimensions that most species didn't even know existed. "Target locked," Torres reported. "Quantum tunnel established. Ready to fire on your command, Captain." Henderson took a deep breath. What he was about to order hadn't been done in over 200 years. Not since the early days, when humanity first ventured into the galaxy and met species that saw them as primitive targets, suitable only for conquest or slavery. Fire, the weapon, discharged from the Vengeance, produced no visible beam, no dramatic energy bolt streaking across space. Instead, reality simply changed. At the exact point where Crystalline Spear Station existed, space and time folded in on itself, creating a localized gravitational anomaly that lasted for exactly 1.7 seconds. When the anomaly collapsed, Crystalline Spear Station was gone. Not destroyed in the normal sense, not reduced to debris or molten metal, but simply erased from existence as if it had never been built. The 50,000 personnel aboard vanished with it, their matter converted to energy and scattered across several dimensions at once. The effect on witnesses was immediate and profound. Every military vessel within sensor range recorded the event, their instruments struggling to process what they had just observed. Emergency communications flooded Galactic Command. Networks as reports of the impossible weapon discharge spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. But the Vengeance wasn't finished with its demonstration. The destruction of Crystalline Spear sent shockwaves through every military command center in the galaxy. Admiral Zorax of the Sorak Empire watched the sensor recordings for the 5th time, his scaled hands shaking as he tried to understand what he was seeing. "How is this possible?" he asked his science advisor. "A space station with 50,000 people simply vanished. Our instruments show no debris, no energy dispersal patterns, nothing. It's as if reality itself was edited." His advisor, an old Sorok named Vec who had served in the military for 60 years, studied the data with growing dread. "Sir, I've reviewed our historical files from the early contact period. There are classified reports that mention similar incidents, but they were dismissed as sensor malfunctions or exaggerated battle accounts." Meanwhile, the UN's Vengeance continued its mission. Captain Henderson ordered the ship to its next target, a Sarok heavy cruiser called Scaled Fury that had been conducting suspicious training exercises near human colony worlds. The cruiser housed 3,000 of the galaxy's most experienced reptilian warriors and carried weapons capable of cracking the surface of planets. High Commander Rax commanded the Scaled Fury and had built his reputation through 40 years of successful military campaigns. When his sensors detected the approaching human ship, he felt a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Humans were known for their diplomatic skills, not their military prowess. "Unknown human vessel, you are approaching a Sarok military exercise area," he transmitted. "Alter your course immediately, or be prepared to face the consequences of your intrusion." The response came from Captain Henderson with the same calm tone he had used with the Valkyrie station. "This is the UN's Vengeance. We are conducting our own training exercise. Your cooperation is appreciated." Rax studied the sensor readings of the human ship and felt his confidence waver. The vessel was enormous, larger than any warship he had ever encountered. Its energy output was beyond anything in the Sauroch fleet, but surely that had to be some kind of sensor error. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ship is powering weapons, but the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Should we go to battle stations?" "Do it," Rax ordered. "If the humans want a fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The Scaled Fury was a masterpiece of Sauroch military engineering. Its plasma cannons could melt through the hulls of most ships in seconds, and its kinetic projectile systems could punch holes through solid asteroid. The ship's crew of 3,000 warriors represented the best the Sauroch Empire had to offer. "All weapons, fire at will," Rax commanded. The Sauroch heavy cruiser unleashed everything it had. Plasma beams, particle cannons, kinetic projectiles, and fusion torpedoes all streaked toward the Vengeance at tremendous speed. The barrage was enough to destroy a small fleet of conventional warships. Every weapon simply vanished when it reached the human ship. The plasma beams, kinetic rounds, and missiles hit the Vengeance's defensive screens and disappeared as if they had never existed. The human warship didn't even seem to notice the attack. "Impossible," Rax whispered, staring at his tactical displays. Nothing could absorb that much firepower without taking any damage at all. Commander Torres on the Vengeance's bridge watched the Sauroch attack with professional interest. "Their weapons are more powerful than Galactic Council estimates suggested," she reported to Henderson, "but still well within our defensive parameters." "Show them what real weapons look like," Henderson ordered. The Vengeance's response was precisely calculated. Instead of complete destruction like the Velkari station, the human ship demonstrated surgical precision. Individual weapon systems on the Scaled Fury simply stopped working. Their targeting computers wiped clean, and their power systems shut down without explanation. The cruiser's engine room went dark as massive reactor cores that had run for decades suddenly became inert, metal and ceramic. Life support systems throughout the ship switched to emergency power as primary generators failed in ways that Sauroch engineers had never seen before. "Sir, we're losing everything," the chief engineer reported over internal communications. "Weapons, engines, life support. Even our emergency backup systems are shutting down. It's like the ship is forgetting how to function." Rax stood on his bridge and watched his powerful warship become a helpless hulk drifting in space. 3,000 warriors who prided themselves on courage in battle and death before dishonor found themselves completely defenseless against an enemy that hadn't even tried to kill them. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "the human ship is hailing us." Henderson's voice came through the Scaled Fury speakers with the same calm tone he had used throughout the encounter. "Hi, Commander Rax. Your ship has been disabled as part of our training exercise. Your crew is unharmed, and life support will remain functional. Please maintain position until rescue vessels arrive." The 3,000 Sauroch warriors, beings who had conquered worlds and never known defeat, surrendered without firing another shot. They had no choice. Their ship was completely helpless, and the human vessel could have destroyed them as easily as erasing words from a page. News of the second demonstration spread even faster than reports of Crystalline Spear's destruction. Military commanders across the galaxy watched sensor recordings and tried to understand how humans had developed weapons technology that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. The Zephyrian Queen Mother called an emergency meeting of her military advisors. Her compound eyes reflected the worry lights of her command chamber as she spoke. "How many more ships like this do the humans have? How long have they possessed this technology?" Her chief military advisor, an old warrior named Clix, reviewed files that his government had kept classified for 2 centuries. "Your Majesty, our earliest contact reports mention human capabilities that were dismissed as impossible. If these reports were accurate, then humanity has been hiding their true power since first contact," Similar scenes played out in government centers across dozens of worlds. Species that had dismissed humans as diplomatic newcomers suddenly found themselves reevaluating every interaction they had ever had with human representatives. Old files were opened, classified reports were reviewed, and a terrifying picture began to emerge. The synthetic coalition's artificial minds experienced massive data recovery as memory blocks that had been in place for centuries suddenly dissolved. They began sharing information about early encounters with human military forces that painted a very different picture of humanity's place in galactic civilization. Emergency sessions convened in capital cities across the galaxy. The careful balance of power that had maintained peace for 200 years was revealed to be built not on mutual respect or economic interdependence, but on humanity's overwhelming technological superiority and their willingness to use it when necessary. The UN's vengeance completed its demonstration and began the journey back to its hidden base beyond Pluto. Captain Henderson submitted his report with characteristic understatement. Training exercises completed successfully. Deterrent objectives achieved. Enemy capabilities assessed and found inadequate. But the galaxy had received the message clearly. Humanity wasn't the peaceful, diplomatic species they had pretended to be for 2 centuries. They were the apex predators of galactic civilization, and they had been politely allowing other species to exist in their space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 hours after the second demonstration. Representatives from every major species gathered in the main chamber of Zephyr Station, their faces showing mixtures of fear, anger, and confusion. Ambassador Helen Morrison sat in her usual chair, her diplomatic smile unchanged despite the chaos erupting around her. The Velkari representative, General Vexkar, stood first. His crystalline features showed deep stress fractures that ran like spiderwebs across his face. "You destroyed an entire military installation without warning," he accused, pointing a sharp finger at Morrison. 50,000 lives were lost in an instant. Morrison's expression remained calm and professional. "The crystalline spear station received adequate notice to evacuate all personnel," she replied. "The decision not to do so was made by your military commanders, not by human forces." What she didn't mention was that the Vengeance's weapons had been programmed to provide a 14-second window between target lock and firing. Plenty of time for emergency evacuation if the station's commanders had believed the threat was real. Their failure to act had been based on the assumption that human weapons couldn't possibly be as powerful as their sensors indicated. The Rock delegation demanded answers about the fate of their heavy cruiser. High Admiral Voss, whose scales showed the deep green color of extreme agitation, slammed his clawed hand on the council table. "You disabled one of our most advanced warships without destroying it. Why show mercy to us and not to the Velkari?" The Scaled Fury was conducting military exercises near human colony worlds, Morrison explained patiently. The response was calibrated to the level of threat presented. "Your ship's crew remains unharmed and will be returned safely once appropriate diplomatic arrangements are made." Across the galaxy, military commanders and government leaders were having similar conversations as they tried to understand what had just happened. The Zephyrian Queen Mother stood in her palace's command center, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting as she reviewed files that her own administration had classified beyond top secret 2 centuries earlier. The reports detailed first contact with a human exploration fleet that had responded to Zephyrian territorial challenges by demonstrating the ability to move their planet's moon to a different orbital position without disrupting its gravitational relationship with their world. The moon had been relocated by 500,000 kilometers, held in its new position for 6 hours, then moved back to its original orbit as casually as someone might rearrange furniture. "How did we forget this?" she asked her chief advisor, mandibles clicking with nervous agitation. "How did we allow ourselves to believe they were harmless newcomers?" The answer lay in humanity's own diplomatic strategy. After demonstrating their overwhelming technological superiority in those early encounters, human negotiators had deliberately played down their capabilities. They allowed other species to save face, while ensuring that territorial and trade agreements were settled heavily in humanity's favor. Over time, the shocking reality of human power had faded into classified files and restricted databases, while public knowledge focused on humanity's cultural contributions and peaceful diplomatic initiatives. Fleet Admiral Catherine Bell appeared via holographic projection to address the Emergency Council session directly. Her silver hair and weathered features showed the accumulated strain of decades spent managing humanity's most dangerous secrets. The UN's vengeance will remain on active patrol status for the foreseeable future, she announced with military precision. Its mission parameters include deterrent operations against any species or coalition that threatens the stability of established territorial boundaries or existing trade agreements. The message was clear, without being explicitly stated. The galaxy had operated under a carefully maintained balance of power for 2 centuries, with humanity holding disproportionate influence that had seemed mysterious to species who had forgotten the real reasons behind it. The Vengeance's return to active duty served as a reminder that this balance existed not because of diplomatic niceties or economic considerations, but because humanity possessed the power to enforce it, absolutely. In the days that followed the demonstrations, remarkable changes began occurring throughout galactic civilization. Military buildups that had been escalating for months suddenly ceased across 36 star systems. Territorial disputes that had been moving toward open conflict found diplomatic solutions with surprising speed. Trade negotiations that had stalled for years resumed with unprecedented cooperation and flexibility. The synthetic coalitions, artificial minds completed their memory recovery and began sharing information that had been locked away for centuries. They revealed records of early human military actions that painted a picture of technological superiority, so complete that resistance had become literally unthinkable. Dr. Lisa Park continued her archaeological work on the dead world of Kepler 4c, but now her findings made perfect sense. The massive craters and impossible blast patterns were evidence of weapons tests conducted by early human military forces. The energy signatures that had seemed theoretically impossible were simply the result of technology that operated on principles most species didn't understand. The humans weren't exploring space like the rest of us, she reported to her research team. They were preparing for war on a scale that the galaxy had never seen. When they encountered other species, the demonstrations of power were so overwhelming that everyone chose cooperation over conflict. Captain Henderson stood on the bridge of the UN's Vengeance as the massive ship returned to its hidden berth in the outer Sol system. His crew secured the weapon systems that hadn't been used in anger for 2 centuries, knowing that their brief reappearance had restored the careful balance that kept galactic peace. Oracle File Mission Report. Henderson ordered the ship's AI. Mission successful, Captain, the artificial mind replied. Deterrent effect achieved. Galactic military posture returning to peaceful status. Estimated time until next demonstration required. Approximately 150 to 200 years, based on historical patterns. Henderson nodded grimly. The cycle would repeat itself eventually. New generations of alien leaders would rise, who had no personal memory of human power. They would begin to believe that humanity's position in galactic affairs was based on economic influence or diplomatic skill, rather than the simple reality of overwhelming force held in careful check. Ambassador Morrison returned to her regular diplomatic duties. But now the other species representatives treated her with a mixture of respect and barely concealed fear. Trade negotiations that had dragged on for months were resolved in days. Territorial disputes that had seemed intractable found solutions that heavily favored human interests. The galaxy had remembered, reluctantly and with considerable unease, why humanity's entry into galactic civilization had been so smooth, and why certain questions about human capabilities had never been pressed too hard. The careful balance of power that kept the peace existed because one species possessed weapons that could reshape reality itself, and the wisdom to use that power only when absolutely necessary. Somewhere in the cold darkness beyond Pluto, the UNS Vengeance waited in silence. Its crew maintained their eternal watch over a galaxy that had learned, once again, that some powers were too dangerous to challenge and too important to remember clearly. The human species continued their role as reluctant guardians of galactic peace, their true strength hidden behind diplomatic smiles and cultural exchange programs, revealed only when the alternative became chaos. The galaxy had remembered, and, in remembering, had chosen the wisdom of peaceful coexistence over testing humanity's resolve. Some lessons were worth learning more than once.